Okay, lesson 3 deals with party de-alignment. And in the last lecture, we talked about realignment. And so when we talk about de-alignment, we are talking about, just a second here. There we go. We're going to define de-alignment as views that a growing number of voters and candidates do not identify with either major political party, but are independents. And so even though there is a realignment of voters, drawn to one political party or another based upon their political ideology, there is also a significant movement of people not actually feeling aligned with a particular political party. And so they are moving away and distancing themselves from individual political parties. This is going to begin in Texas in the 1980s. It happened at the national level in the 1960s and 1970s, but will reach the state of Texas about a decade or so later. And there is some proof that suggests that de-alignment is occurring. First of all, low voter turnout. In Texas, Rick Perry was re-elected to his final term in office in 2010 with only 27% of the voting age population participating in the election. And so low voter turnout is really thought to be symptomatic of de-alignment because it demonstrates significant apathy towards the two major parties. So there is a little bit of proof in that low voter turnout. There is also proof in the increase of split ticket voting. This is voting for candidates from different political parties instead of just one political party within the same election. And so by and large, it has been common for people just to go into the voting booth and vote a straight ticket party, just hit the vote all Republican or vote all Democrat, because they align themselves with a political party. But increasingly, we're starting to see less people do that and more people split ticket vote and vote for different individuals of different political parties within the same election. And so that sort of helps to demonstrate that people aren't going to be as involved in one political party over another, and they're maybe looking particularly at the individuals instead of the political party that they represent. Asking party affiliation. This is some of the most direct assessment of de-alignment. And based on polling data, the number of people across the United States who identify themselves as a member of either major political party really appears to have declined. In 2016, a survey was conducted, and it asks individuals whether they identified as a Democrat or Republican. And 44% of respondents considered themselves independent. So, you've got a really big swath of people that aren't aligning themselves with one political party over another. And since 2011, we have seen this consistently grow. We've seen a significant consistency with people identifying themselves not with a political party, but more independent. But there is some evidence that suggests that even very deep down, even if we consider ourselves to be independents, we do align with one political party over another. If we are forced to absolutely admit one or the other, so you probably do swing one way or the other if you consider yourself independent, but. So there's some evidence that might suggest de-alignment is occurring on a larger scale, but there's also some evidence that's, suggests that it might not be as big a thing, and some political scientists argue that in a state dominated by one-party politics really contributes to this low voter turnout because the political efficacy of individuals, the ability for them to feel like what they do changes something, is really low. So there is, a movement thought to be a movement of this de-alignment, so that is just something that you need to keep in mind. And then the third party movement. By and large, political parties, third parties, do not have huge success in politics, but from time to time third-party movements do develop in Texas and even at the national level. We have seen at the national level the third party get a little bit of traction in a couple of different areas. George Wallace ran as a individual with the American Independent Party, which was a pro-segregation party in the 1950s, and he ran for president, in 1968, and he was able to garner 19% of the vote in Texas. So there has been some support of these third parties. The Raza Unida in 1970, meaning the United Race party, they run candidates for several state and local offices, especially in South Texas. And they support the election of Hispanic Americans in Texas through the 1970s, but they are still major in play even in modern day. And Ramsey Muniz, who was running for an office in 1972 for governor, was able to garner 6% of the vote. And so not huge, but it shows that there is some kind of attraction there. And then the Libertarian Party has put forth candidates for statewide office in Texas for many years. Libertarians adhere to the principles of respect for individual rights, constitutionalism and the rule of law, personal responsibility, and limited government. They do not receive more than a small percentage of votes, especially because many Republicans also espouse the same principles. But it goes to show that there are some people that do gain a tiny bit of traction in running for that Libertarian Party. Ross Perot in 1992, a Texas industrialist, will run for president, and he will receive about 22% of the statewide vote in Texas, as well as an impressive 19% of the national vote. So there is some traction there as well. But by and large, they have not made huge impacts on Texas politics. And this is largely because there are some things that are sort of stacked against third parties. First of all, the rules of governing elections in Texas, as in many other states, do not make it easy for third parties to gain access to the ballot. So even if third parties do gain access, they still face an uphill battle to secure the financial resources necessary to run a successful high-dollar media campaign. Often the best that a minority party can hope to do is to have their ideas picked up by a major party. And so oftentimes these major parties will see the limited success of these third parties and will sort of absorb some of their ideas. Let's see. So also financial resources aren't huge. People don't typically, big donors don't typically donate to smaller third-party candidates because they have a very small chance of winning the election. Excuse me. And so when they are up against these Democrats or these Republicans who have huge war chest funds to fight a battle, political battle, then they are sort of the underdog, and they don't have the access to the financial resources. And as I said, they do absorb, the major parties do absorb these ideas of the smaller parties into the mainstream party and make their ideas mainstream. Many of these third-party movements center around one specific idea, and if that gets absorbed into a major party, it really just obliterates or eliminates these third parties that have emerged. And in America, we have a very narrow political ideology. We're not necessarily open to new ideas or new ways of doing things, and we're very much steeped in tradition, and so we're not really going to venture outside of what we know. Also, because we utilize what is known as the first past the post, so this FTPT should be FPTP, first past the post, or single member districts, it really doesn't leave a lot of room for third-party movement. So SMD, single-member districts that operate under the first past the post, any individual, whoever wins the majority of the votes, it doesn't even have to be a majority, it could be a plurality of the votes. Whoever wins most of the votes in FPTP, SMD districts are going to be the winner. and so it's winner take all. So even if one group gets 49%, and the other two groups are going to split the other 51%, even though that 49% isn't a majority, they have a plurality, and they're sort of the first past the post because the other 51% is split up amongst two or more political parties. And so you don't see success for the third party movement because of this. We have no proportional representation, meaning from a congressional district, we might elect more than one individual, and if one group gets 20% of the vote, they'll get 20% of the seats in the legislature. If one group gets 50%, they'll get 50% of the seats. And so even though it still allows for the majority to hold more seats, it also allows for some of these third parties to come to the table. And this is going to be kind of something that is operated more in a parliamentary, and sometimes other democratic nations are going to utilize this, and I'm not sure that any other states utilize this, but it is not something that is utilized here in Texas. And so it brings us to what is known as Diverger's law, and this is a scientific law indicating that the electoral system strongly conditions the type of party system that will result. And so an electoral system in which candidates in single-member districts only need to win a plurality incentivizes parties to develop broad pre-election coalitions and de-incentivizes more narrow parties that cannot win a large share of the vote. And so there is going to be a little incentive for individuals to vote for these third parties and essentially, quote, waste their vote. And so we typically see factions in Texas emerge within political parties. We don't necessarily see third parties develop, but we see the Republican Party sort of fracture into different factions, like, you know, the mainstream Republicans and the moderate Republicans, and then the conservatives, and then the people like the Tea Party, who are still Republican, but they emerge within that particular political party. So we don't see a whole lot of third-party success. We just see some successes within already developed political parties in regards to these factions. So we're going to stop here, and in the next lecture, we will be discussing some interest groups. So I'll see you then.